I am Chester Dunham, and this is the Dunham Report, a marketplace of ideas for labor, civil rights, and other issues of social justice. I am Dunham, and I'm the host of the show, and my co-host is none other than Mr. Wesley Crenshaw. Tonight, the first part of the show, we have our guest on, and she was on the show before with us, but her name is Alicia Scott. Tonight we want to make you the viewing audience when we leave the show tonight and weeks after, leading up to November the 6th, I think it is, in our election, which is the midterm election, which is very important. And we're going to be talking about this, but what we want to do is to bring Alicia on, and then we're going to be talking about her ventures and what she planned to do. She's running for office, and we're going to talk about that. We're delighted to have you on the Dunham Report with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, good. You are seeking a seat in the area where you live. Other words, but it's not local, it's not local government, it's not county commission, it's not the Board of Education, it's not city council.
It's not municipal.
But it is a state position. So therefore, you are running for 164.
Yes.
That position now is being held by Ron Stevens. If I'm pretty sure Ron been there approximately, I don't know for sure, but approximately 20 years or something like that. But he's been there several terms. And of course, we're not going to dwell on him tonight, but we will touch base on a few things and his record, and which is public information. And number one is that we want you. First, let's go this way. I'm going to take 2 or 3 minutes in your own way. You're talking to the viewing audience. You're talking to the people.
Okay.
So it's going to be you to tell the people, myself and Crenshaw, but everybody, why you decide to run for office and maybe the difference you can make. But whatever you want to do, I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
Okay.
All right.
Well, yes, I decided to run for public office because one of the things I noticed was that our elected officials, they're some of the wealthiest elected officials in the country. They're paid some of the lowest salaries. What that told me was that people are running for office in these positions for personal gain. And then they're politicking, and they're helping all their friends get rich. So what we really need in Georgia, what we really need more than ever, is we need more public servants and less politicians. So I'm running for office to actually bring the service part and the power of governance back to the people. We don't have any good representation. There is no one in our current state legislator in our delegation, which is the Chatham County, the Chatham delegation. No one really represents the interests of the citizens. We've got growing property taxes. That is directly in line with tax credits and tax abatement programs. Cities are running budget deficits, and they're using the citizens to subsidize it. They raise your property taxes. When they can't get enough money, they raise your personal property taxes, and that's because we are absolutely gluttonous with corporate welfare programs. We've got too many local and state tax credit and tax abatement programs. That's just a clear sign of legislators not giving enough consideration to the individual. They're not connected with their constituents. Now, many people believe that local government is only your municipal offices, but you have a state legislator, you have a state House of Representatives person, and you have a state senator. Those are still local elected seats, and those seats affect you every day. They affect your wallet, They affect your bottom line. They make a decision about how much you pay for water, how much you pay for gas. When we look at programs like East Bloss, they affect the cost of all your goods and services. And you have to pay an extra penny or an extra 1%. Those state level people are making those decisions, but they're not connected with you. You have no idea what bills they're pushing. They don't send out legislative reports. They don't send out newsletters. In many cases, I have found that some of our state level representatives don't even respond to a constituent's email. I know that was part of my problem. So I'm running to actually bring the power of governance back to the people of Georgia.
Well, Ms. Scott,
My phone is
that's okay. Tell the people a little bit about yourself. People like to know who they're voting for. Give us a little bit of your personal history.
Okay, so a little bit of my personal history. I was born and raised in Compton, California. Yes,
Okay.
that's it's very cliche, but it's actually the truth. I graduated from Compton High in 1994.
Okay.
My family, my aunt, my mother, my father, they all went to school there. And I went to the University of Maryland. I have my undergraduate in political science with a minor in English. And I went to graduate school in Northfield, Vermont. I graduated from Norwich University, which is a private military college. I got a master's in diplomacy and international commerce. I went back home and I worked as an executive for Jackson National Life and Pacific Life Insurance Companies. I worked in the financial services industry, so I have an extensive background as a licensed stockbroker back home in Los Angeles for multiple Fortune 500 companies. So I've held lots of leadership roles. And I have a practice spouse. I'm married to my second husband, who's 22-year Army veteran, and we moved to Georgia after living overseas in Asia for a couple of years in 2011. So I volunteered heavily with the United States military. I came here and I have volunteered heavily within the Savannah community. One of the things I've done on the ground here in Savannah is I have helped a city elected official as well as a couple of state legislators put forth 3 pieces of legislation in the past 3 years. And the one piece of legislation that I'm really proud to have worked on and been an integral part has been the renaming of the Talmadge Bridge. Because I'm a strong proponent against the Confederate monuments.
So let me ask you guys, what is the name of the Talmadge Bridge now?
Oh, well, it's the Savannah Bridge now.
Well, okay,
The bill is out there.
It's out there, okay.
Because I want to talk a little more about you. I don't want to mess with Talmadge Bridge. I'm not going to do that tonight. That's another topic and another subject, another debate, another everything. I'm going to go back to political education. A lot of people sometimes don't understand the importance, and they don't understand how education works. You did say a little bit about it, but number one is that you live here in Chatham County.
Yes.
So you got representative people who represent you in local government, which is city and county.
Those municipal.
That's well, right, but still don't want to clog them up. I want them to understand basic thing. I'll say like Joe Madison, the Black Eagles say, we're going to put it where the goats can get it. Then we have education. That's 3 forms of local government where an individual lives. Then we move into the state government. And we understand and let people know how state government works. Now you're running for state position.
A State House of Representatives.
Right. So now your part now, you will play the part of a state representative, which affect people where you live at locally right here.
That's right.
Here's a situation last year, budget, the whole thing. Everything that happened in Atlanta last year, it's in here. Governor Deal signed it into law after the legislature worked on it and agreed, the Senate and the House, and then he signed it into law. Everything is in here. So the basic thing, I can go into this, I got some more information on it, but I can go in there and I can say, pull up Ron Stephen, well, you know, who was your incumbent, or the person who was representing you and everybody over in that area for a long period of time. And then I could go to various things in here that affect people. Don't have to specifically, but then you can go and see basic thing that my main thing now is telling people that look at the situation and see how an individual vote, and whether, because you got so many people who vote against your interests.
Yes.
Who you vote for and send them to Atlanta, and you think they're doing the right thing, and they're not. But if you go back and take a report card and check that, then you will see. So that's one of the key things that you just said some things, and you can go back, you know, into discuss it even more. But that's what's happening here now. The situation is that I got a lot of friends who are elected officials who serve us in Atlanta. One of the key things that the black legislative, the ones who said that they always boast and brag, and I tell them, don't brag, I don't want to hear you brag about that, but we have the largest black caucus
in the nation.
Throughout, well, you took the word out of my mouth, but in the nation, that's right. But if you look at the position and that the bills and the various things that they have to deal with in this book, in here, they outnumbered, and they don't get too much done unless they are able to work along with the other side, the people on the other side of the tier, which is Republican, and see can you come together and get some things done. But the basic thing now in government, and that's why this midterm election is so important throughout the United States, because the things are not getting done, not whatsoever at all. State government runs almost like the U.S. government. I heard somebody mention something tonight about Georgia. I think they said, Tracy said, Georgia is a blue state. Not only Georgia, most southern states and a lot of other states, basically, if you check the census and the Democrat, Republican, and you check all of those individuals, all of these states will be blue states. That's why we have to educate people and get them and understand the importance of election and get them to turn these states around. Then you can start seeing things move in a different direction. That's another thing, and I'm going to stop talking because I need you to talk. That's another thing is that it's so important that local government, if we can start moving up, local government, if you get the right people elected locally, and the system goes on up like your pyramid that you're building it, you start here and you move up. You can take the state, and then you can move on to the national and these sort of things. And that's some of the things that we will have to start doing, and hoping that I'm going to come back to you and let's talk about your position and how you can make a difference, and making sure that you get those individual people out there to vote for you, to make sure that we send you to Atlanta to represent the 164th district. But it's not that you are representing people with that. In other words, you're forming the whole state coming together as a group, because you cannot do anything by yourself. But when you come together, the more we can have people to represent us in these areas, then you can change that red to blue. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question.
Talk. Y'all talk.
Okay.
Have you considered some of the committees you would like to be on if you're elected to take care of the programs that you're interested in? Like,
Yes, I have. So I would like to sit on the Economic Development Committee,
okay,
and I would like to sit on the Public Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I would like to sit on the tourism
Okay.
committee. Those are the three I'm really interested in. Economic development, primarily because we miss out in our area. It's almost as though Savannah has absolutely no representation in Atlanta. When we look at the $100 million bond package for transportation that they just issued this session, it's all for things in Atlanta. As if Atlanta needed any more money to build their public infrastructure. They have a very nice tax base there. I'd like to see what we can do about getting something coming down to Savannah. We have a port, and the port operates almost independently of the city and the county, and then the state. They just pass right over the city of Savannah when it comes to those things. I'd like to see what we can do about light rail. I mean, if we had rail coming down, if we had rail that went from Atlanta to Augusta to Savannah to Macon and on out through Tennessee, that was passenger rail, imagine how we could connect economically with those hubs. I mean, public transportation, access to public transportation is a direct economic driver. It is a direct economic driver. And no one stopped to think about it. You know, I look at the 16, and real quick, and I'm gonna let you talk. I look at how they're taking down, you know, all the trees going down the middle of 16. Yeah. That's the perfect place to stage, you know, light rail coming from Macon, coming from Atlanta into Savannah and off into Augusta. Now, if we can connect, if we can get those hubs connected, we can really drive economic development across a large swath of our rural area. I mean, we've got a lot of unused land here that's just there.
Mm-hmm. You know, you're talking about light rail. Aren't we building something in Cordelia, Chester?
First I wanted to just for a moment, this is a green light think tank, as we call it. Mm-hmm. It's a group of people throughout the state of Georgia, not Atlanta, not Savannah. Atlanta started it. They was doing some things. Now what we're doing is working along with them and trying to bring in these 159 counties together to talk about a state government, to talk about some of the things you just got through talking about just a few minutes ago. This project right here dealing with contract, dealing with taxpayers' money. Black makes up, not one minority, but blacks, people, makes up 30% from the census, say that we make up 30% of the population of people in the state of Georgia, 30%. The legislature passed last year and year before, what have you, monies, economic money that goes on projects and contract and all of these things, 2% to black people. That's why we are saying now, as a group of people, to the legislature, care who you are, whether you're white, black, Republican, Democrat, don't make us no different, that has to change. We want 30% of that, the revenue and stuff for these things. What you think about that?
I think that 30% is an absolutely feasible number. They do close to 50% with public contracting in Atlanta and Fulton County. 30% is fine with the state contracts. The Office of Developer Supplier, Diversity Office for the Georgia Department of Transportation just launched in 2016. So we've got to give it a couple of years to ramp up, but we absolutely need better oversight. We need a better everything at our state level elected offices area. For instance, did you know that the Office of the Attorney General for the state of Georgia does not have a civil rights division? There is no one on staff at the Attorney General's office that investigates civil rights cases. We also don't have a hate crimes law. We don't have any hate. There are no hate crimes on the books in the state of Georgia. Now, there are some members in the Legislative Black Caucus that try to do this every year, and I don't know if it is, a lack of creativity or just the red Republican stonewall that they come up against. But I will tell you this: you mentioned something earlier that it says it doesn't seem like they get much done. One of the things I have noticed is they don't get a lot done because they don't engage their constituents. They don't bother to build up or ignite their base to get things done. You've got Atlanta, which is about 50 to 60% minority. It's all, when you look at just all communities of color, it's probably about 75% just as a whole, including African American.
We're talking about, that's because when you said Atlanta, because we got to deal with
Fulton
County. Okay, yep. Fulton County is, and that's what everybody in look at. But then all of these other, we'll talk about that later. But anyway,
when
when you're really talking about the hub in the mecca city of Atlanta, right in the downtown in that area, it's like the 50-some-odd% black.
Right. When you come around to Augusta, and then you come around to Savannah. Savannah's the third largest city in Georgia. Savannah has a port. She should be the second center of gravity. But imagine if our, majority black Democratic state delegation actually engaged the Savannah community with a bill they wanted to pass. Now, if they were able to, if they actually came to the community and said, hey, we are trying to do this, then you'd ignite the community to write letters, to show up at the Capitol, to actually do something. But they absolutely, and I just have to say this will be critical of who will be my my teammates come 2019, but they're wholly disengaged. They're as bad as their Republican counterparts.
Well, one of the things that I've always said, we need a few more Maxine Waters in Chatham.
We absolutely do. And the sad part about it is we have so many men in the legislature.
You wouldn't know that.
Nobody speaks up. It's always the women. I mean, there were no, I hate to say this, I know that she was the minority, House Minority Leader, but where are the men? Where are the black men who were viable to run for governor? We have to have I love the fact that it's a woman. I don't want to seem sexist at all, but I can't, they're all forgettable.
Well, one of my things is I'm trying to get a t-shirt that says brothers help the sisters out there already listening all the time.
Yeah.
You just mentioned something just a few minutes ago, and this is what I was talking about all the time, and people need to understand. And I tell elected officials this all the time, but they don't know what they be thinking about, really. When you deal with getting your community, the people involved, it makes a difference.
You can move mountains.
You sit in your butt there in Atlanta, or what have you, and a bill or something come across the desk, or you're looking at, you come back home and says nothing to nobody. And that's the problem. Local government, state government, national, everywhere. Like you said, these kind of things change things and make things happen. And I'm working on putting together a strong group of individuals right now locally here in Savannah to deal with some of the situation, the problem, to identify some of the things that you're talking about now. Then that little group that we put together is not going to be the spokes. It's going to be the people speaking, because we will be calling town hall meetings with hundreds and thousands of people, bringing them together about certain projects and certain things that's happening right here in the state and everywhere else. That's some things that we have to do.
That's the things that we have to do. Yeah, and the sad part is that the legislators, on either side of the aisle, none of them hold town halls. None of them come down and speak to constituents. They're hard to get a hold of. Their numbers don't work. They don't have consistent emails. I mean, really, they're just, you can't even really follow unless you watch it on the antiquated state website and you try to watch it streaming. Another thing is that the legislative session, General Assembly, is only in session for 40 days. So, and they're recessed the rest of the year.
You know, one of the things I think the problem is that our elected officials are not forced to take any kind of direct action.
They're not. And we don't hold them accountable.
We do not hold them accountable.
And we don't even know, I'm running against this gentleman and I'm going into the communities and he's got some signs up in the neighborhood. And so I asked, the first thing I asked the group, I said, well, do you know who your state representative is? And they're like, no. So at some point in the conversation, I mentioned his name and they go, oh, is that who that is on those signs? We didn't know what he was running for. They didn't even know his name. But that just goes to show how disconnected. Thank God for candidates like our state superintendent nominee, Otha Thornton. He's, he's saving black men all across Georgia. But
we need saving.
We need. Chester has an objection.
This book here, it's round table book with black women, and this is the 5th annual report. Up to the top, they got time for a power shift.
Yes, definitely.
This book deal with factual stuff with black women.
Mm-hmm.
This book tells you that in the last few years, and it's happening every day, every primary, everywhere election comes up, black women's are winning position.
They're winning.
I just came back from a conference a month ago in Arizona, a Philip Randolph National Conference, 1,000 people. But the key thing were factual stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing is this election coming up.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing is the election coming up, and the basic thing is black women's throughout the United States now are winning election.
Mm-hmm.
They will tell you that they take the data, they take all that information down, and you go into a neighborhood or go into a district or somewhere where the color might be more Caucasian or other color in that, it might be more in minority.
Mm-hmm.
And black women are still winning in some of those places.
They are.
So this is what's happening now throughout the United States, and we're going to make sure that it continue to happen. They talk about the state of Georgia at the convention. They got the state of Georgia as one of the top states that they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the United States, even overseas, people are looking at the state of Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
And Abram's name is up to the top because they said we got to pull this off. Aside from that, we're talking about all these other seats that we got to make sure that we capture. And we're going to talk about that because our next guest is going to be Mr. Thornton, who's running for school superintendent of the state of Georgia. But we're going to be talking about all of these things. This show is going to go out and people would be able to see it and talk about it and make sure that we expose you as much as we can. So we're going to have to go off, but if you would tell the viewing audience with another 2 minutes, he's showing me a minute, but another 2 minutes, that this is what needs to happen.
So what needs to happen is everyone needs to go out. You need to check your voter registration. You need to find out who your local and state level representatives are. And then you need to go and punch an all blue ticket. You need to punch an all blue ticket. That means vote Democrats all the way down the ballot. You need to go all the way down the ballot. Don't just stop at Stacey Abrams. Go through Stacey, Sarah Riggs and Miko. You want to hit all of your statewide candidates, and then you want to make sure that you keep voting and checking Democrats off all the way to the end. Now, in the event that you don't have an option for a Democrat, please feel free to write someone in. You do not have to give the Republican your vote. You can write someone in if they don't have an opponent, but that will start getting that through your head so that you make sure that you vote all the way to the end. We need every single person to vote down the ballot.
Thank you very much. Mr. Crenshaw.
Well, good evening, everyone. This has been the Dunham Report. Our guest today has been Miss Alicia Scott for the 164 House seat. We ask that you make sure that you go out and you vote. This is the marketplace information for organized labor, civil rights, and political education. social justice, community involvement, and political activism. Like us on our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram.
This is the Dunham Report, and we are back again with the second half of our show. And we are still talking about the political arena in the upcoming election in November, which is so important. And so we, as on this show, will continue to share with you all, the viewing audience, all the information and everything that we can get for you in order to help you make up your mind and make sure you go to the poll and vote on election day. You know, a lot of folks talking about right now, and this is the key thing that the A. Philip Randolph does in education, teaching people about education and the political process. And our key thing is voter registration, voter education, and get out to vote drive. I dramatize voter education because we try to educate individuals and give you all the information that you need. So when we get through with that, you don't have to worry about going to register, because if you're not registered, you're going to go and register. And if you definitely register, you're going to turn around and get out to vote, because you will then know the importance of voting and how it will affect your life. Mr. Thornton.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dunham.
Good to see you tonight. I
Likewise.
heard a lot about you and my former co-host, Mr. Robert Thornton.
Okay.
And we talk all the time, and I asked him, was you all related? And well, he gonna make sure that he gonna claim you if not. But anyway, he talk about you all the time, and we talk in this situation. But not only us, but people are talking about you now around the state of Georgia. My neck of the woods is down in Glenn County, McIntosh County, Camden County, those areas down there, Liberty County and Chatham, all up in this area. But anyway, we want to make sure that, especially throughout the state of Georgia, what we are focusing on now and trying to form coalition with various group of people throughout these 159 counties to make sure that the message is out there and the importance of voting. Now, you are running for a position which is talking about education.
Yes, sir.
And that's, to me, that's what all the other representatives from different boards and different division and different part of government, that's one of the most important. So again, we are delighted to have you on the show with us tonight. We're glad to have you.
Yes, sir.
And I know Mr. Crenshaw likewise feel the same way. And then before we leave, we're gonna have Mr. Lang say a few words too. But right now, I'd like for you to look in your camera and tell the viewing audience 2 or 3 minutes or what have you, whatever you feel like telling.
Well, first off, Tom, thank you for having me on tonight. I'm Otha Thornton, candidate for state school superintendent. And people ask, what is that? You know, that job, you are responsible for, you are chief education officer for the state of Georgia. You are a chief administrator. You administrate the federal and state funds that come into Georgia. The budget is actually $11 billion, about 52% of the state's budget. So basically every 52 cents in tax dollars that Georgia spend, every dollar, 52 cents goes to education. About 40 cents in K through 12, and then 12 cents towards higher education. So there's a pretty significant amount of the budget and influence. Also, you're the chief advocate. You know, I have to work with teachers, administrators, support workers to try to make sure that we get working with the legislature to make sure we get good policies passed through to make a difference in our school systems. And the last thing is Chief Acquisition Officer. As a state school superintendent, it's my duty to look for resources to support our school systems. My big three items as the state school superintendent are number one, wraparound services. Wraparound services basically provide mental, social, and just basic medical needs for children in our schools. Georgia has a pretty high poverty rate for children, which is about 30% in our state. So again, if those needs are not being met at home when they're sent to the schools, they can't perform to their academic potential if those needs aren't being met. So wraparound services. Number two, school safety. As far as school safety, if you address some of the social needs, you'll reduce some of the violence and issues that we're having in schools. And also, here in Georgia, we've had 3 counties that have approved the means to arm teachers in our schools. And I am totally against arming teachers. Teachers in classrooms to teach, not to fire upon students and others. And the third thing is funding. Georgia's an interesting story. In 1870, when the Department of Education stood up, there were they started black schools and white schools. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, Georgia, along with most of the southern states, said we will not comply with the law. 1956, Georgia took it to the next level. Governor Griffin at the time told the federal government that we will make every public school private before we integrate in Georgia. I'm from Elberton, Georgia originally. I've lived in Savannah, Columbus, all around Georgia, but most of my schooling was in Elberton and Augusta, Georgia. My school wasn't fully integrated until 1972 in North Georgia. So let's fast forward to 2018. This school year, Georgia is spending $100 million for private schools. So they're holding true to the promise they had back in 1956. It's called the Student Scholarship Organizations. Basically, what's happening is a organization set up a student scholarship organization. People can put up to $9,450 into that pot of money. That money goes to pay for private schools, and the person that put the money in writes it off on their taxes. So funding out, and I'll close with funding. We have the money in Georgia. It's just a matter of how we're allocating the funding. If we can ask a company, if we can get about $1 billion to offer a company to come to Georgia, we can find $200 million to invest in our children through wraparound services and funding our schools.
You just mentioned the state of Georgia, and it's in here. I just haven't checked it out yet, but it's in here. And you just mentioned $11 million.
Yes, sir.
52%. Now, I've had on this show, and a lot of time I tell people, any budget you pick up, whether it's a state budget, whether it's county, whether it's city budget, any type of budget, local budget you pick up, and the budget itself, when they fix it all up, the key portion, education, is the top.
Yes, sir.
And that's a fact. You will show right on point there when you're dealing with education. I'll tell you another thing, and if they check it out, Wes and I talk about this because he is an educator. He talk about a lot of stuff like that, but we talk charter schools.
Yes, sir.
And I've always said it. I mean, they try to dress it up, and I don't care what they do. But to me, charter school is a pathway to a private school. In other words, they take away from public education, and then when you see anything again, they put up a charter school, and eventually it's a lead way to a private school, private institution. And that's what you want to say something.
So I can speak to that. I am opposed to private charter schools. Any public charter schools, and those are the schools, charter schools that are approved by the school district and have to give accountability to the school district and the taxpayers, I'm okay with those. But the private ones where they can discriminate against students, and basically, like say, almost private schools, I'm totally against those particular private charter schools.
Well, my concern about the school system is that we as a minority community did not put enough emphasis on our education.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, for instance, I noticed that we spend a lot of money in our churches. We should be putting that money in our school system and our kids. Now, as far as I can see, is that charter schools are schools where they always take money from the public schools and put them over there so somebody else can use it. But my input is that there's enough of us, enough community churches, that we could actually rectify the situation in our community if there was a desire on the part of our leadership. And when I say leadership, I'm talking about our pastors. We have a lot of mega churches, a lot of properties they own, a lot of all kinds of stuff. If they were to put at least some emphasis on education. For instance, I was thinking about the other day, if all of the pastors in the community were to say to the people, go out and vote on that issue of health care. You know how many people that do exactly what their pastor told them. So we have the capacity in our community to rectify the thing about education. I'm not so crazy about integrated education as I told Chester before. Now, Chester will tell you that water has leaked on him, but it doesn't seem that it done any problem with Chester when he was in elementary school. Mm-hmm. So my thing is, schools we can do a whole lot more with what we got than if we would put our mind to it. And our community is not on, what is happening is that we talk about this, but those of us in the middle class like myself, we're satisfied if our kids go to school. We really don't care what happens to other kids. We may talk a good game. So when I'm looking at what's happening now with the school system, when we come around talking about low-performing schools, we had the superintendent here along with a school board member, and we asked them one question. 5 years, they said that they would make sure that we didn't have any low-performing schools in Chatham County. So I made a deal with them. I said, okay, so 5 years from now, if we still have these low-performing schools, can I take you down to the river and throw you in? They didn't think that was a good idea. My issue was we had at one time minorities controlling the school system in Chatham County. So they could not complain about a lot of issues that they had before. Now we have control of a lot of things in Chatham County. Why aren't we seeing those improvements?
Well, sir, when you look at a problem, you have to look at the history of the problem. Okay. So if we talked about school systems, black and white school systems starting in Georgia in 1870. Mm-hmm. And before that, remember, it was against the law to teach us to read and write.
Right.
By law. So as we move throughout history, if you received inferior books, if you received inferior funding, although our people did find it a way to get a good education, we were always having to run twice as hard and twice as fast to get that. So you talked about integration. We integrated, and we had the social issues and matters to deal with. And back when you were in school, probably, and I know when I talked to my mom, where you had the community who felt responsible for kids. So if you were disciplined at school, you went home, you're probably disciplined too. We don't have that type of community today. And that's where, as you deal with the social issues and mental issues based upon the way society has changed since then, we have to address those issues. And until we do that, we will continue to have issues in our schools. It can be fixed. I will tell you that there's a lot of promise in Savannah school systems. I was a National Parent-Teacher Association president, so I worked in all 50 states and all our territories with school systems. As a past national president, I actually evaluate every year schools of excellence around the country, and the ones we have overseas. Now, Savannah, Dr. Levette, who I'm a big supporter and fan, she has helped marshal in some of the signature programs and magnet programs in the system. In about a decade, I think Savannah will be a school system to reckon with, in spite of historical challenges that they've had. She's got the infrastructure set up, and now it's a matter of us finding resources to help do some great things. And I'll give you a perfect example. Groves High School. I believe they're building a new Groves High School. Environment is very important. And they have a ports program, like a port logistics program over there. I think that can be improved and expanded upon. That can really make a difference. I think one high school do tourism. So as you start developing those schools and systems, it will make a difference. Now, I worked with the school system in Maryland that we had 10 different high schools with 10 different functions. I was on the Creating High Performing High School Committee back about 11 years ago. To date, they have 1,000 businesses linked to those 10 high schools. So every kid that wants a job, internship, apprenticeship can have a job. My son did an internship with NASA through the Homeland Defense High School that he attended. So we can have that same thing here in Georgia. Just taking working resources here.
Well, you know what? I've heard this story for 22 years,
Yes,
as
sir.
I said to Dr. Levette.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm concerned about is that the poor kids that don't seem to ever get taken care of. We have magnet programs, we have all kinds of programs, but when it's all said and done, the same groups of poor kids are going to be left behind. What we do with these programs is that we produce programs that take care of middle-class black kids and whites. All the poor kids are still left behind. I guarantee you 10 years from now, we'll still be talking about poverty and the poor kids in the school system.
Sir, what I will say to you is, for the last 16 years in Georgia, they've underfunded at the education budget by about $9 billion. So I want you to think about it. That's almost 2 decades of children that they were not given the service they needed. So if you had a child in Savannah in first grade, and 16 years ago, and they needed a mental or social services, they didn't get it because we didn't have the money. Now this year, because it's the election year, they dropped an extra $167 million in the education budget to do some of these programs, wraparound services that we're talking about. But that has to be sustained, and it's not a hit and miss thing that you give funding this year, not this year. You have to be consistent. And as state school superintendent, when we talk about Savannah, are we consistently giving them the funds for those poor kids to meet their social, mental, and medical needs so that they can excel? Because as you know, between pre-K and 3rd grade, as far as reading, having them on a proper reading level, and just giving them a good start in school, that's critical. And that's what's not happening. And that's why the cycle is continuing, what you see.
But that's another, because we can't take up all that time with that. We're going to have to come back and have a special program for education, and then you can talk all you want, because he ran for president, or not president, but he ran for school board member. I wish he had won that darn thing to see what he.
And I also put together a charter school.
Things change.
Yes, sir.
The bottom line is, I'm glad you mentioned that just a few seconds ago, because Kingston, when a while back when he was in office and Bush was president, and Bush was pushing the Leave No Child Behind Act and everything else. So Kingston, key thing on the show, because he told me, and I hit him with this because he said he was an educated Congress. In other words, his top priority was dealing with education. And I said, well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because just recently, which the Republican administration was in office, in other words, it was the second term around. So Bush had, it was more, in other words, they control the House and the Senate. So what happened is that I said to Kingston, and he could hear it because it's the truth. I don't lie. So anyway, the situation here was, I said, now since your key thing, one of your key project is dealing with educators. He said, yeah. He said, I said, well, okay, let's look at school budget last year. The Congress had just, what they did was they, right, I'm wrong. The Congress, who was controlled then by the Democrat, they, in the budget, then they introduced their budget. And the budget that they introduced was, I think it was over a 10-year period, was something like 27 or 28 billion dollars. That was the government part of that federal money now coming here, not the other money, but that's federal money to help fund the Leave No Child Behind Act. That's what it took. And I asked, what I did was that the Bush didn't sign that. The president didn't sign it. What he did is he introduced, his budget was, I think, 11 point something. So eventually, that's what they did. They okayed the 11 point something that the Congress at that time, the 11 point something. So leaving 13, 14 or more billion dollars in Washington that we needed here. And that's what you just said in a sense, that the money is there and they put these things out here and this sort of thing. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Mr. Dunham,
It's a true thing.
I can tell you, I actually worked in a nonpartisan role directly for President Bush and President Obama and their administrations. I was President's Communication Officer and Director of Human Resources for White House Communications. So here's what, when Bush signed the No Child Left Behind, the intent behind No Child Left Behind was really to privatize schools.
Okay.
That was the intent. And what they did, they set up the law where they had all these unfunded mandates, and the public schools were going to fail. They knew this, and so they said when they signed the bill into law, I think it was 2001, 2002. They said what we want to do is by 2014. 100% of kids will be reading on grade level and doing math. That was unrealistic. I mean, we have all the hope in the world, but they knew that. So to fast forward to, a decade later, all these schools are failing, and then the Republicans say the public schools are failing. We need to give vouchers. So that was intentional, and that's what's happening. It's always been happening in Georgia to try to push money off into private schools.
I want to let, before we run out of time, let Yvonne Lang come in and say a few words, because he just recently won a position seat right here locally in Savannah, so that's a start for him, and I know in the future we'll see great things coming from him, and I want him to, however you tune in and say something. I'd like to have you say a few words before we leave.
Well, I appreciate being here. I'm so blessed and honored to be here with Mr. Otha Thornton, you, Mr. Dunham, and you, Mr. Crenshaw. As being a young person, I'm at 24 years old. I'm blessed to be at a table such as this. I'm also blessed to have made some history here in Chatham County as the youngest ever elected official in the county's history, and as the first former foster child to be elected to public office here in the county. But I'm also humbled that I get the opportunity to protect the fundamental right that was granted to us, and that many of our ancestors had to fight for and die for, and that is the right to vote. And on the Board of Elections, which is my position, I get to make sure that the vote is protected and that the elections are ran fairly and impartially. So I'm very happy that I get to do that.
I think I told my wife the other day, might have been this week, when she knew you had won and everything else, and she said, well, what his position is, what his job and title is.
This is true.
And I told her, just recently, I said, well, you asked me the other day, I said, so let me probably tell you better than I can. Just the other day, I said, right here in the state of Georgia, a little county they call
Randolph County. Yes, sir.
I said, and in the end, it's two individuals who was dealing with the election process, Board of Election. I said, that's a little small county. I said, we got 5. I said, but they had 2.
Well, let me kind of speak to that a little bit.
Okay, and I told him, I said, the other day, I said, that's the type of decision in the future, and stuff like that is his job.
Many people don't realize, one of the things that I was taught a long time ago, that all politics are local, right? But one of the other things that many people probably don't realize is the Board of Elections hold a lot of power in regards to how the elections turn out to a certain degree. As you mentioned, Randolph County, we have the ability and the power to close polls or open polls. And what that does is that gives individuals, citizens, accessibility to the vote, to the ballot. So if we were to, for example, close a poll in a high dense area of, whether it's a high dense area of African Americans, low income, or even in rural white areas or whatever, that makes it difficult for people to be able to vote. And that means the turnout could be lower. And if the turnout's lower, then the person that they may not have wanted to win may win. So my goal and my job is to make sure that every poll is staffed properly, that all voting machines are working properly, that if we need to make adjustments, if we need to look at how the polling places are staffed, how many ballot boxes are actually in the polling place, if we need to look at that constantly, make sure lines are not long, make sure that our poll workers and poll managers are being courteous to citizens, that all is a very high experience that we have to look at.
In other words, it is actually that Johnson signed into law in 1965, the Voting Rights Act.
Correct.
That's what you're saying right there now is so true. That's all combined. That's what they just had Supreme Court decision, and they're battling it still yet. It's not settled.
Correct.
With Shelby County in Alabama, and but the key, and that was in 2013,
correct.
June something 2013. But that's the key thing is that, and we're talking about Section 4 and 5 of the Voting
Correct.
Rights Act. And they dealt the other day with Section 4.
Right.
And we have another program bringing on talking about that, because we just recently got to talking about that the other day. But we can explain Section 4, Section 5, Section
Correct.
2, all of these things.
Now, let me say one more thing that a lot of people also don't realize is that Chatham County is the only county out of 159 counties. We're the only county that elects our Board of Election members. There are 4 members, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, who are elected countywide by their respective parties. And between those 4 members, we vote for a chairman. If there's a deadlock, which sometimes there is, and in the last time there was, then that decision goes to the county chair, the county commissioners, and then the chair is picked by that way. But we're also one of 3 counties who still have a separate Board of Registrars and Board of Elections. And that means the Board of Elections' sole purpose is to run and operate the elections. That's from staffing polling places to counting the ballots. The Board of Registrars are in charge of the registration, voter registration, purging, in that sense of what I'm hearing more and more, that term of purging the polls or purging the voting rolls. That is over there, but I have taken it upon myself in many respects. I have talked and spoken with and met with the director of the Board of Registrars many times, just so I can make sure that I'm caught up and made sure that I'm aware of their process so that I can direct citizens in the proper way.
I'm going to say this now, let me say this, because I'm glad you mentioned these things, because I'm definitely going to have you on in the future, because both of those individuals who are the heads of both of those departments, we were talking, I was going to bring them on and still going to bring them on to explain in detail the duties and responsibility of each Board of Election and Board of Registrar. We're going to do that, and you being a part of that now, we could even go a step further and help a great deal. I'm going to tell you this right here, and I'm going to let him talk, but these new machines that we're using now, we in the process of maybe changing them. But I had to start messing with this thing yesterday. I was involved with this thing so much until when they first came up with the new machine, they had certain people they had on the payroll to service certain communities, certain counties and all this kind of thing. And I had one guy that he must be had about 8 or 10 counties. And I used him more than anybody. And in the end, I end up, we might have to go a little further. I end up with taking machine home on the weekend and processing them and going out there and training people.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. But we got but a little time left. So I'm going to have to let him.
I mean, no.
Okay,
I'm glad I met you because I've had a complaint with my polling place for the last 3 or 4 times. My wife is a handicapped person. She's in a wheelchair. And Jonesville Baptist does not have the right ramp for people to go into, so we need to talk about that.
Okay, we'll get that done. Let him finish up and
Now you,
give me the signal.
Oh, no problem. Well, Mr. Dunham, thank you for having me on the show this evening. My website is www.othathornton.com. That's OTHATHORNTON.com. Again, I'm a candidate. I'm the Democratic nominee for the state school superintendent in Georgia. Big 3 things is wraparound services, ensure that we take care of our kids so they are ready to learn. Number 2, safe schools, ensuring that we're providing the resources to keep our safe schools. And 3, funding. We have the funding in Georgia. It's a matter of allocation and using it correctly. I look forward to everyone coming out on November 6th. Please vote and also please donate. And that's at www.othathorn.com. Mr. Dunham, thank you for this evening.
Thank you. Wes, you want to take us off?
well, I hadn't planned to, but I will. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Dunham Report, your marketplace for information for organized labor, civil rights, and political education, social justice, community involvement, political activism. Like us on our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram.